These are the AirPods Pro 3rd generation. A lot has been said about these, a lot of bold marketing statements from Apple, as always. And I'm curious, do they actually live up to the hype? Are they as good as they say they are? And how much better are they from the AirPods Pro 2nd generation? Let's find out more. So I'm going to briefly start with what has changed from the AirPods Pro 2nd generation. At first glance, they look very similar, nearly identical, but there's a lot of changes under the hood. On the case, the old 2nd gen had the light over here. This is now under, so it's hidden. You can only see it when you open. On the old one, the pairing button was also over here. There's no button anymore over here. And to enter pairing mode, you open the case and you double tap on the light over here. And they've removed the button to help with the waterproofing on the AirPods Pro 3rd generation, which brings me to that IP rating. The AirPods Pro 3rd generation have an IP57 rating versus a 54 on the 2nd gen, which means the buds themselves and the case itself as well, apparently, can be, in theory, submerged into 1 meter of water for up to 30 minutes. Now, I do not recommend you go swimming with these, but this means if they do fall out into a pool or some other body of water, they should survive. It also means if you're wearing them while jogging under the rain or if you excessively sweat, they're gonna handle that much better than the Gen 2. The buds themselves are also slightly redesigned. There's a new shape, and the tips themselves are also redesigned. They used to be silicone ear tips. Now the ear tips have foam inside them, so they do help give you a better seal and better sound and noise cancellation. We'll get to that in just a bit. Now, if you noticed on my AirPods Pro 2nd generation, I use foam tips rather than the silicone ones that come with the AirPods, and I'll talk a bit about that later. In addition to the ear tips being redesigned, you also get another 4 size, the extra small, to give you more choices to adapt to your ear. I would have liked if there was an extra large as well on the other end of the spectrum, but at least we get a 4th option with the AirPods Pro 3rd generation. There's also a redesigned acoustic chamber, which supposedly gives you better sound, and we'll talk about that later when I talk about the sound quality. In addition to better sound, Apple claims these offer 2 times better noise cancellation than the AirPods Pro 2nd gen and up to 4 times better than Gen 1. Now, these are very bold claims, and I did test them out to try to figure out if they live up to those claims, and I'll tell you in just a sec what I found out. But more differences than the 2nd gen. They also come with better battery life. Sort of. The buds themselves have better battery life, so now that you get 8 hours with ANC on versus 6 hours on the Gen 2, and you get up to 10 hours with transparency mode. And then that is good news, especially on those long transatlantic flights where I'm not too happy with them turning off after 6 hours. So it's definitely great news that they now last up to 8 hours. However, the battery life on the case itself is less. We used to get 30 hours with the 2nd gen. We now get 24 hours with Gen 3. And I have absolutely no idea why they would do that. I cannot even think of a valid reason. Even if they had to do some redesigns here to fit larger components, it does have a U2 ultra wideband chip for longer distance precision in Find My. I have no idea if the U2 is larger physically than the U1 chip, but even if that was the case, they could have made this slightly larger. It is anyways slightly larger to give us the same 30-hour battery life. So I really have no idea why this has less battery life in the case itself. But personally, if I was to choose between better battery life in the buds themselves or in the case, I would definitely choose in the buds themselves. It is very rare for me to go more than 24 hours without access to a charger to charge the case. Even if I was in the wilderness or on a camping trip, I'll have a power bank with me. So I'd rather get more battery life from a single charge than from the case, but there's that. And there's also now a heart rate sensor on the buds themselves to detect your heart rate during workouts, which is great if you don't have an Apple Watch. If you do have an Apple Watch, I don't think this is very useful. And the good news is if you do wear your Apple Watch and the AirPods, they're going to work together to figure out which is the most accurate reading of your heart rate between the AirPods themselves and the Apple Watch. So you're not going to have duplicate data. So that's good for those who do not have an Apple Watch and exercise, go to the gym, or run with the AirPods. Now, in the keynote, Apple did mention live translation as a new feature in the AirPods Pro 3rd gen. It's not really an AirPods Pro 3rd gen new feature. It's actually a software update that will be coming as well to the 2nd gen AirPods Pro, but also the AirPods 4. So I'm not going to talk about that. It is a very cool feature, but it's not a feature of the AirPods themselves. Apple also says there are new ultra low noise microphones on the AirPods themselves, which help in better noise cancellation. And I'm curious if they're going to help in better call quality, and we'll see that in the call quality tests. So now that we've covered what has changed on paper, what has changed in practice, and how well or how better are they than the AirPods Pro 2nd generation. And I'm going to start with the ANC, the active noise cancellation, because to me that was the feature I was most excited about. And as I said, Apple had very bold claims, twice as good as the AirPods Pro 2nd generation, which had fantastic noise cancellation. So I spent the day testing these out and alternating between the 2nd gen and the 3rd gen. I picked these up this morning from the Apple Store, and I spent a few hours wandering around the city, putting them through all sorts of tests and comparing them to the AirPods Pro 2nd generation to see if they are better and how much better they are. At some point I walked next to construction. I also took the metro. So I put them through a lot of different scenarios. And to better illustrate what I think, I'm going to take a step back to tell you how ANC works, or active noise cancellation. At the very basic level, there are microphones pointing outwards that pick up external sounds, and then there are microphones pointing inside your ear canal to pick up the sound that you are hearing. And then DSP, digital signal processing, the chip, H2 chip on these, it's going to work its magic. It's going to do a lot of computations, and it's going to figure out how to cancel the sound, that is, create an inverse sound wave to cancel the sound wave that you're hearing. So this is how active noise cancellation works. But when we talk about noise cancellation, that is how much noise you are blocking, it's not only the active noise cancellation, but there's also passive noise isolation, which is literally when you're blocking your ears and physically preventing sound from coming in. And this is why a good fit is important, because you would be passively blocking in more sound from entering your ears. So let's go back to one of the changes in these. They have now foam in the ear tips, and that gives them a better seal, a tighter seal. That's by blocking in more sound from coming in. So Apple claims 2 times better noise cancellation. I don't think it is twice as good in the active noise cancellation. The overall experience is better. I still don't think it's twice as good, but it is significantly better. But a big part of that is because you are physically blocking more sound from coming into your ears with the foam inside the ear tips. And to test this out, and I have no scientific way of testing this, it is purely subjective, but what I did, I ran alternate tests in the same environments between the AirPods Pro 3rd generation and the AirPods Pro 2nd generation with foam ear tips, which is the ones I typically use, but also with the silicone ear tips that come with the AirPods Pro 2nd generation. And here's what I concluded. The noise cancellation on version 3 is noticeably better than that of version 2 when I put in the silicone ear tips. You can instantly tell the noise cancellation is better. However, and this is where it gets interesting, if I remove the silicone tips from the 2nd gens and I put my foam tips, which give me a better seal, the difference between version 3 and version 2 becomes way less noticeable, to the point where I had to run dozens of tests and really focus to try to tell if there's a difference. Now, don't get me wrong, they are still better at noise cancellation, but not twice as good. Twice as good meaning 100% better. I would say maybe 10 to 15% better if you have the foam tips on, which means the active part of noise cancellation is only marginally better on the AirPods Pro 3 versus 2. It also means if you have the version 2 and you want better noise cancellation, you can simply buy memory foam tips and get better noise cancellation without having to buy the AirPods Pro 3. Now, Apple also claimed that these have the best noise cancellation in any earbud, and that is a bold claim. I did put them up against the Bose Quiet Comfort Ultra, which in my opinion have one of the best noise cancellation, and the AirPods Pro 3 might have had slightly better ANC, so maybe the claim holds, but it wasn't a night and day difference. It was slightly better, especially at the low frequency sounds. So all in all, on ANC, they are better than the Gen 2. If you're using the silicone ear tips on the Gen 2, you're going to notice a much bigger improvement in active noise cancellation. A lot of that is because of the passive noise isolation from the foam tips. Now let's talk about the sound quality. Apple also claims these sound much better than the Gen 2. Now, from what I can tell, they still use the same drivers, so the drivers themselves were not upgraded. They still use the same chip, the H2 chip. So you might wonder, how can they sound better if the chip and the drivers are the same? And actually, they can sound better. For starter, a better seal does give you better sound. You're going to get a better bass response and you're going to feel deeper bass just because you have a better seal. But more importantly, and Apple is highlighting this, they have new acoustic vents, which improves airflow. Now, to put that very simply, sound is essentially air in motion. The diaphragm on a speaker or drivers is vibrating, and in those vibrations, it moves air, and this is what our ears interpret as sound. So, better airflow can create better sound, even with the same drivers. In practice, did they sound better than the AirPods Pro 2nd generation? And I think they did. Now, it's not a night and day difference, but I think they did sound better. I found they had a slightly wider soundstage. There's definitely a bit more bass and they feel more immersive than the Gen 2. I also felt slightly better clarity and more instrument separation and a wider soundstage altogether. If I wanted to compare how they sound in one sentence, the AirPods Pro 2 in comparison to the 3 sounds a bit more flat, while the AirPods Pro 3 sound a little bit more alive. Now, transparency mode, I think Apple is the king of transparency mode. They have one of the most, if not the most natural transparency mode. It was great on the AirPods Pro 2. On the 3, it is still great, but it does sound slightly different. And to my ears, it sounds a little bit more natural on the AirPods Pro 2nd gen than on the Gen 3. But the Pro 3, it seems they emphasize brightness and they tried to boost the vocals a little bit. But the big difference here I want to highlight, and it's really a testament to how well the transparency mode on the AirPods is. On the Gen 2, when I use them with the foam ear tips, the transparency is noticeably worse. It does not feel very natural. It sounds muffled, and it's nowhere near as good as using those with the silicone ear tips. And that's because the foam ear tips, they're blocking more sound from coming in, which leads to that muffled transparency mode. The Pro 3 have foam in their tips, so they are blocking in more noise. But despite that, the transparency is almost as natural as the AirPods Pro 2nd generation. So it's doing a lot of work to give you that natural sounding transparency mode, which is really incredible. So wonderful transparency mode on these, a little bit to my ears less natural than the AirPods Pro 2, just marginally less natural, but that's only because I feel Apple is emphasizing vocal clarity to help you better hear your voice or the voice of someone else who is speaking. And they almost feel as if you have nothing in your ear. So transparency cannot beat Apple in that area. So now let's see if there's any difference in the call quality performance of the AirPods Pro 3 versus the AirPods Pro 2. So let's see if there has been any changes in the call quality of the AirPods Pro, and these are the AirPods Pro 2nd generation. And I actually have an actual phone call right now that's being recorded. So this is what you would sound like if you were having a phone call in a quiet environment with the AirPods Pro 2nd generation. Before switching to the AirPods Pro 3, I'm going to do a stress test to see the noise cancellation capabilities, and I'm going to turn on a very loud vacuum cleaner next to me. Now, before I do that, as you know, the iPhone has the capability to do voice isolation. That is to isolate your voice for a clear phone call. And to start with, I'm going to have it set as standard, so no voice isolation, just to see how well the AirPods themselves are able to cancel out the sound of a vacuum cleaner. So this is with the AirPods Pro 2nd generation and a loud vacuum cleaner. And I just turned on voice isolation. So now both the AirPods Pro and the iPhone themselves are working together to cancel out the sound of the vacuum cleaner and to, in theory, give you a clear voice. Now I just switched to the AirPods Pro 3rd generation, and this is what they would sound like in a quiet environment. And again, I'm gonna turn on the loud vacuum cleaner, and I'm on standard mode, so no voice isolation on the phone itself. And this is what you would sound like if you're having a phone call with a very loud vacuum cleaner using the AirPods Pro 3rd generation. And I just turned on voice isolation. Again, the vacuum cleaner is still on. These are the AirPods Pro 3rd generation, and this is voice isolation with a loud vacuum cleaner. So now for the final test, I'm going to head outside to show you guys how you would sound like if you're actually in a real life situation on a busy street having a phone call. So let's head outside. So I am standing on a loud and busy street. As you can see, there are cars passing by from all around, and I have the AirPods Pro 2nd generation on right now. And again, this is an actual phone call that is being recorded.
and I have the phone set to standard, so there's no voice isolation. Let me switch now to voice isolation. So this is for the AirPods Pro 2nd generation with voice isolation enabled on the iPhone. And this is what they would sound like in a regular phone call. Before switching to the AirPods 3rd generation, I'm going to switch to the camera's microphone
so you can hear how loud it actually is here.
And now let's go to the AirPods 3rd generation to see if there's any difference in the call quality. Now I have switched to the AirPods Pro 3rd generation, again on the busy street, on an actual phone call. And again, this is standard voice isolation, so there's no voice isolation set on the iPhone. And this is what they sound like. Let me now switch to voice isolation. And now this is voice isolation on the iPhone with the AirPods Pro 3rd generation on a busy street. Let me know in the comment section, did you notice any difference in the call quality performance between the AirPods Pro 2nd gen and the 3rd gen? Let me know.
So here are my thoughts on the AirPods Pro 3rd generation. I think they are fantastic, but they're more of an evolution than a revolution. So the differences from the AirPods Pro 2 feel a bit more incremental rather than transformative. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of improvements in a lot of different areas, but they're just marginal improvements in my opinion, especially if you put foam ear tips on your Pro 2. The gap in performance between them and the Pro 3 becomes even smaller. And although there is a lot of upgrades on the 3, from the better IP rating to the heart rate sensor to the better battery life to the redesign of the foam, I did feel a bigger leap going from the AirPods Pro 1 to the AirPods Pro 2 than I did going from 2 to 3. The 2nd generation felt noticeably better than the 1st generation in both the noise cancellation and how they sounded. And I did not feel that big of a leap going from Gen 2 to Gen 3, which brings me to my recommendation. If you currently have the Gen 1 AirPods Pro, I would definitely recommend going to Gen 3. You're going to notice a huge improvement. As I said, I already felt a huge leap going to the 2nd gen. The 3rd are even better. So you're definitely going to feel a huge difference in every aspect. If you currently have the Gen 2 and are wondering if you should upgrade to Gen 3, and I would say it depends. If you really don't know what to do with your money, then yeah, by all means, get the Gen 3. They are better in every other way. But if you don't particularly have $250 to shell out to new earbuds at this moment, then I think sticking to the AirPods Pro 2, if you're still happy with them, will not disappoint you. Again, if you have a problem with the fit, or if you'd like slightly better sound and better noise cancellation, I would definitely recommend you getting memory foam tips. These are from Comply. I've been using them for years, ever since the Gen 1 AirPods Pro. And not only do they give me a much better fit, because without these, there's no way the AirPods stay put in my ears. So they give me better fit, but also better noise cancellation. And it's a far smaller investment to get memory foam tips to get slightly better performance than buying the AirPods Pro 3. That's it for me. Thanks for watching. I will put links in the description to the AirPods Pro 3. If you do decide to purchase these, I would appreciate if you would go through these links. They are affiliate links, so I may earn some commission on some purchases at absolutely no extra cost to you, but this will greatly help support the channel. As always, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel, as this encourages me to continue producing content. Until next time, cheers.